everybody, and welcome back to Dan and Cat Talk. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Dan Amrich. I'm the Dan in Dan and Cat Talk, and joining me, as always, is my lovely wife, Katrin Auch. Hi, Kat.
Hello.
How you doing this week? What have we been up to? Real quick, because people have always asked. They're like, I miss you finding out what's going on in your lives. And I say, well, we're not that important. They're like, you're important enough for us to listen to your show, so tell us. What are you up to lately?
Well, we got terrible sunburn participating in an event for your office where we ran a fake Amazing Race event.
Yeah, sort of the one thing that we gave people clues, and they sort of went on a self-guided tour through San Francisco, Amazing Race style, and they had different challenges at different checkpoints. And one of those challenges should have been, did you remember sunscreen? Because Kat and I did not. And my nickname this week...
It's gray in San Francisco, right?
Yeah, it's gray in San Francisco, except those UV rays still come through and cook your skin.
It was not gray. It was bright and sunny.
Yeah, it was actually a gorgeous day for it. But yeah, my nickname this week was Lobster Thermodan.
Oh, that's very good.
Yeah, I was really, really bad. So we're both recovering from that. I'm wearing my lightest possible T-shirt. Also, we've been farting around with the Destiny beta. Oh my God. Oh my God. I believe the Destiny beta will be over by the time anybody hears this, but it seems like beta keys were pretty easy to come by, and then even if you didn't get in the beta, I think they made it go wide for everybody. So, yeah, that game is living up to our expectations. This is the perfect game for Kat as a budding shooter person, but who loves social experiences in gaming, and that's why you play a lot of MMOs.
True.
And while this is not an MMO, it still has that persistence of a world the way that an MMO does that makes it fun to play with other people.
The only thing that has been disappointing in the game is Peter Dinklage.
Yeah, the voiceover for Peter Dinklage is a little underwhelming, let's say.
But there have been other voices that I'm like, oh, I really like that. Oh, and I think that's this person, but I'm really happy with that. But yeah,
surprise, Nathan Fillion is clearly the voice of the hunter trainer, and what do you know, Kat really likes being a hunter. I'll do anything you say, Mr. Fillion. It's cool. You're laughing because you know it's true.
I do.
And I thought I heard Gina Torres as the Warlock trainer, which is a nice little Firefly trainer.
Sewell as the speaker. So.
Yeah, so I'm not really sure, but I'm not surprised to hear that Bungie's getting A-list talent for this either. But yeah, totally cool. Very eager to see the release of that game in about 6 weeks. September 9, it's coming out. And hey, what do you know? That's our wedding anniversary. So guess what we're getting each other for our anniversary? We're getting each other time to play Destiny, because the family that plays together stays together, or
and
something.
You know what else? The family that watches the Tour de France together stays together too. Because I used to watch the Tour de France with my family when I was a kid.
It was a super awkward segue. Yeah, I have to call that out.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I fully embrace that. But the funny thing was that, you know, in watching the Tour de France, with my family, we not everybody picks the same person to champion, so that was always a nice competition.
Well, see, I've been totally ignorant of the Tour de France. It's, you know, this month-long bike race apparently that happens every year apparently in France. Hence the name.
Or France and surrounding areas.
Yes. France and surrounding areas. Yes. So we actually called an old friend this week who is really into cycling. He used to race himself, not professionally, but you know, he used to race in school. And he did the AIDS ride, which is this great charity ride from San Francisco to LA that happens every year, and he trained for that a couple of years ago, and you know, had nothing but great things to say about it. But he's the guy that I know that gets really excited every year and says, oh, I got to get home and I got to watch the Tour de France. And I'm thinking, like, this is like NASCAR, only not as fast. You know, like, they're just riding a bike. But how much fun can it be to just watch people ride a bike? It's like watching golf. I don't understand that either.
No, it's well, yeah.
That's what today's show is all about, is we're going to ask Paul to educate me, if nobody else, about the Tour de France. Why is it interesting? Tell us some of the history. Tell us what it takes to do this kind of thing. Give us some of the sort of anecdotes, a little bit of the checkered past and the checkered flags. See, that was also an awkward segue. So why don't we just go straight to meet Paul Curthoys? By the way, it is interesting to note that Paul has the unique distinction of being my boss twice.
Is he the only person who's had that distinction yet?
I think so. Paul has been he was my boss at at GamePro when I came on in 1997. He was my direct report guy. And then when we met up again at OXM, we were thrilled to work together again because we got along very well. He was the reviews editor, and he was senior to me, so I sort of reported to him a bit there. And then I got elevated to the point where we were basically equal senior editors, just doing things. But I still think of him as my boss in a lot of ways.
I thought he was executive editor.
No, he was not. I don't believe he was executive editor.
I think you're wrong about
Maybe
that.
he was eventually executive editor. No, because I think, I don't know. But he's always been my boss, and now he's the boss of cycling. So let's talk about the Tour de France. Oh, yeah, I guess he was exec editor. Hey, Paul, thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here.
I know you used to be very podcast averse, so I'm kind of curious to see how this goes. Because when we were at OXM, you were like, you guys go and have fun and do the podcast. I'll be here, not on camera, not talking on the mic, which was fine for Ryan and I, because we were all like, hey, we're two wild and crazy guys, and but when it comes to cycling, you're kind of, you and Kat, I guess, are both cycling nerds of different feathers. And
I'm a little less. I was raised by a cycling nerd, but not. Yeah, I mean, the Tour de France has always been a big deal in my household from when I was a kid. Like I remember it really big starting in the 80s. That was a big thing.
Is that when you got into it, Paul?
It started for me in high school. I've always liked riding my bike, and in college I ended up being on the cycling team for a good chunk of years and really got into it, and just developed a deep love of riding and racing. And even back in college I was still a bigger guy, so I was never one of the ones going up hills fast, but I was actually a pretty good sprinter and could do fairly well on the flatter stages. So coming out of college, going into the workplace, you kind of just lose time for that sort of thing.
Sure.
So it faded off, and I started just following the Tour de France on TV. That was in the early 90s, and it was getting, there was a time when you really couldn't see it anywhere.
It used to be you have to really seek it out. And even when I was growing up, I remember it was one day a week, one channel, and I think it was Sunday, one of the channels would run several stages at once. Everything that happened that week would happen,
just in an edited
television
package, see the highlights, and there you go.
Yeah, one of those NBC Sports Sunday things that they don't really do anymore because there's, so many channels and all that sort of stuff. But, so I started catching it there, and then, about 10, 15 years ago when Lance Armstrong sort of emerged onto the scene, and U.S. in general started being excited about cycling. The TV channel was called Outdoor Life Network at the time, and then it became Versus, and then later NBC Sports, and they just started showing wall-to-wall TV coverage, 6 hours one day of the whole entire stage, that sort of thing. And much to their surprise and to my delight, it took off, and they really developed a following, and then the network has gotten really big, and people, they do a full-on sports production around it every year. So, Kat, what you said really rung true, because my kids are growing up in exactly that kind of house. They go, ooh, bike races on, Daddy, let's watch. And
yeah.
We have to drag them off to bed every night in July. So for me, it's gotten to the point where July is my favorite month of the year because it's summer, it's warm, there's 4th of July, which is a great holiday, and then we watch bike race all month long, and it's kind of a good family fun thing, and my kids love it, and they know more about cycling than I ever did at that age, and they both love getting out on their bikes, and it's just been a great thing.
So, Paul, can you actually, I know, but can you break down what the Tour de France is?
Yeah, I am completely cycling ignorant. I did not grow up with any of this, and I don't know any of the backstory whatsoever. I'm so it happens every July after what you just said. I'm at that level.
So yeah, it does run every July. It starts usually in the beginning of the month. It's a 3-week bike race. They have 2 rest days across those 3 weeks, but really they're on their bike for 5 to 6 hours a day. So to me, that's one of the things that's amazing about it. It is absolutely the hardest and most intense sporting event in the world. There's nothing else like it. They usually start with a prologue or opening stage in a different country. So prologue is a short race, just like 5 or 6 miles, where the sprinters are actually out there in a time trial fashion, going really quickly. But this year they started in England, which was a great choice because 2 of the most prominent cyclists right now are British. So there was a huge turnout from the British fans, and they actually had some great races for the first 3-4 days of the tour. And the races are mixed into there's several different kinds of stages. There's flat stages, which tend to be sprinter stages because that's where the big guys who can go fast for a short period of time can kind of manage to stay with the peloton, which is the name of the pack, all the way through to the end of the stage. And then there's usually a huge, massive sprint finish where the sprinters' teams lead them out. So a lot of cycling is about staying out of the wind. So when you ride behind someone and draft the way you do in a car race, you can really turn, you can feel it. You're about an inch or so off of their tire, and you're spinning your pedals at, maybe 3/4 to 2/3 of the, power output that the guy in front of you is. So they develop what are called lead out trains, where 5 or 6 riders are going as hard as they can in a row. The guy at the end of the train is the best sprinter, and the 5 or 6 guys in front of him basically pull him to the line, blow their legs out as hard as they can to just keep the speed as high as possible. And then they get them to usually maybe 500 meters from the finish line, maybe a little closer, depending on what the geography is like. And then he pulls out into the wind, and the other sprinters are out there doing the same thing. And it's really physical. There's a lot of jostling, and you really have to be a good bike handler and be able to stay on your bike. And it's kind of like a mad, crazy NASCAR dash to the finish line.
Now, I just want to say at this point, because we haven't mentioned it yet, the Tour de France, though it is a bike race, it is unusual because it is a team bike race. That there are teams from each country has its own team. Well, no, there can be more than one team from a country, can't there?
Right. It's all corporate these days, much like NASCAR. So there's corporate sponsors.
So that's why people would let other people draft on them.
Right.
Like, because, if you're racing, you don't necessarily, like, if you're doing a race with somebody else, you don't necessarily want somebody drafting. But that's why you have a team that's all in support of the star cyclist. And it's the idea is to get that person, that whole team is working to get that person across as fast as they can.
Yep.
So while Lance Armstrong is a household name, there were 5 other guys that helped him become a household name?
Yeah. Oh, many other guys.
Okay.
A team in the Tour is 9 riders, but they change out which 8 riders support Lance Armstrong, on a yearly basis. So there are a couple of famous names who helped Lance over the years, like George Hincapie is probably the most famous other American rider who cycling nerds would know well. But yeah, no, they're organized around corporations. So Lance was on the Postal Service team. Strangely enough, our mail system needed to sponsor a bike race. I never really understood that one.
Well, it's a private corporation. It's not actually.
Yeah, I guess that's it.
Yeah, and I'm terrible at remembering the other names, but there were a couple other Discovery Channel, I think, was the sponsor for a while, and so it's things like that. A lot of these days, it's more European corporations that an American audience is pretty unlikely to have heard of. So it's things like Saxo Bank and Lamprey and other sorts of names that I think if you're European are as common as Discovery Channel to us, but less so for the American audience.
When I was watching back in the 80s, Bernard Hinault is a really well-known French cyclist, and he was really owning the Tour for a while. And what was interesting is Greg LeMond was on his team, I believe, right? He was an American cyclist, but he was on Bernard Hinault's team. And then LeMond proved to be enough of a challenger to Bernard Hinault that he ended up being the sort of lead on an American team later and winning a couple himself.
And that's one of the things that makes the bike race fascinating to me is it's not just about watching these great athletes go up hills really fast and do things that, frankly would tear our legs off. But there's almost a soap opera element to it of you get to know this cast of characters doing this crazy bike race over a couple of weeks. And there is all kinds of drama on the teams, like the kind you just mentioned, Kat.
Yeah.
This year there was the top team is Team Sky, or was Team Sky. And they had Chris Froome, one of the British riders I mentioned before, as their lead rider. But they also had Sir Bradley Wiggins on their team. He won the bike race, I believe, 2 years ago, possibly 3. And they ended up leaving him at home, even though he would have been, the second, third, or fourth best rider in the race for sure, because of the tensions between Chris Froome and Bradley Wiggins. When Wiggins won the Tour a couple years ago, Chris Froome was ordered to support him and was told, you can't go for wins. You have to make sure Wiggins wins. And it was really clear watching the race that Froome could have beaten him if he was allowed to beat him, but he wasn't. His team management said, no, you're what's called a domestique. You support this guy. We've picked him to be the winner. And it just led to all this inner team tension. And then Wiggins ended up being hurt the next year, so Froome came back and actually did win the bike race. And so this year, when Wiggins was in shape, there was all this drama, and they ended up leaving Wiggins at home. And then the other thing that I think is really interesting about the Tour is all the crashes. And we can talk about it in more detail later, but Froome ended up crashing out of the Tour in the first couple of stages this year. And so Team Sky just completely shot themselves in the foot, and they left their second best guy at home. And so their team has done nothing in the race this year because of that one, I think, asinine decision. So
is that basically, did it just come down to personality conflicts at that point and egos of the riders? I mean, all these guys are
they all have huge egos.
Yeah, well, they're doing incredible things. As Paul said, these are the kind of hills that would rip our legs off. Like they are trained and they are the best in the world, and that's why they're on this world stage. But maybe it's just the way that I look at team play. Like, if you can have Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, I don't care if they don't get along. I want them to work together, even if one of them has to understand that today I'm supporting the other guy. But it sounds like it just isn't that way in that situation anyway.
It's not like the funny thing is, it's like the person who the big thing that you're chasing for in the Tour de France is the yellow jersey. That's the thing. Each person who wins a stage, each day there's a different stage. And I don't know if it's every day. I haven't watched it in a while. And like I said, I was watching it very compressed from that. But you'd be striving for the yellow jersey, and whoever took the last stage got the yellow jersey, and then they wore it, and they were the one to catch. Now, it's a cumulative prize. It's not just the last person to win the yellow jersey wins. It's all of the place on all of the stuff, but it's not like the team place, it's the individual place, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you could explain the scoring, because I'm baffled now, because I'm like, there's multiple days, but are they averaging the time over each days, or is it like NASCAR where you get 5 points for a win in this towards the whole season? Do they treat the Tour de France like a season?
The short answer is it's overall time, but it's one of those things that, again, I think is a fascinating layer of the Tour de France. Is there's multiple competitions going on in every race. So the overall winner of the Tour de France gets the yellow jersey, or as they call it in French, the maillot jaune, and that's the person with the fastest time for all 21 stages, whatever they have. So fastest time from start of July to end of July, cumulative overall, and that's why what the teams are working for, and that is the biggest prize of the race. But there are also stage wins, which are very prestigious, and you just get a nice trophy at the end of the stage for being the first guy across the finish line, and you can actually win the yellow jersey without ever winning a stage, though that is kind of deemed
unusual,
a bit of a sissy way to win the bike race. And usually if you're a good enough rider to get out there and win the yellow jersey, you're going to make sure you put your mark on the stage or mark on the race and at least win a stage or two.
Sure.
But then there's also a sprinter's jersey. I was talking about the sprint finishes before. So there is a points competition there where throughout each day's race, there's kind of sprint sessions, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, and you can get points for being, a third of the way through the bike race, sprinting and crossing that finish. 2/3 of the way, there's another sprint, and then the big sprint at the finish, and you get the points are really complex. I've been watching this for 20 years and I have no idea how they work. I just listen to what the announcers tell me.
Right.
But you get points for finishing first, less points for second, that sort of thing. A big stage finish is more important than an intermediary sprint, but you get points all along the way, and they tally them all up at the end of the day. And whoever wins that competition wins the green jersey.
Yes.
Then there's a third one called the polka dot jersey, and that's for climbing, and it works much like the sprint finishes in the green jersey, but it's top of the mountain. So whoever's to the, some days they'll go over 5 or 6 mountains literally.
And he's right. These are not, when we were talking about hills that would break, right? Because these are not hills. Mountains. These are freaking mountains.
These are Alps. I mean, these are, sometimes they're doing, there was a stage a couple of days ago that was only 80 miles long, but they went uphill for probably 20 to 30 miles of it. I mean, I'm
just going to say it was only 80 miles long.
Well, the longest stage of the tour was 150 miles this year. I mean,
oh my goodness. I mean, my dad is a big cyclist, and he, not only did he ride across the country, but he also fairly regularly did Centurions.
Yep.
Which,
yeah.
Which means 100 miles. So
exactly. Yep. Yeah, I've done a bunch of those. I'm not in any sort of shape to do it anymore, but I did do the AIDS ride a few years ago, which is a bike ride from San Francisco to LA, where we take a week to get down the coast.
That's awesome.
And those were 100-mile days most days. If you're in good shape, a 40 to 50-mile bike ride is not that tough. I found that
sounds really.
It sounds imposing as hell.
If these guys are going. In a flat-out sprint, they're going 30 to 35 miles an hour. They're probably going 25 to 30 miles an hour just as that average spinning sort of speed. And then when they're going downhill, they go upwards of 60 miles an hour off of the backside of these mountains. So they can cover a lot of ground. And that whole aerodynamics thing we were talking about before really plays into it too. You can actually sit there and be going 30 miles an hour and not actually be expending that much energy, because that's where the team element comes in. They're around you. They're protecting you. They make sure you're never out in the wind if you're the team leader, that is.
Yeah.
They'll even go back to the follow cars and get your drinks and your snacks. I mean, so that you don't ever have to step out into the wind. If you get a flat tire, they stop right beside you, give you their bike, and off you go. And then the domestique gets a new tire from the team car and catches up and does that sort of thing. So
I think it's funny because domestique is French basically for housemaid, or like domestic. It means
it is,
the person
sure.
who does who is in your house and takes care of you. So yeah, it's exactly that. These guys who are themselves world-class athletes are just there to serve the head of the
team leader. Yep.
So if you've got 9 people on a team, you've got your leader, you've got your sprinter, you've got your climber. I mean, is everybody else a domestique at that point, or do you have multiples of these guys? Even the sprinter and climbers
are domestiques, because you've got if you're going for the yellow jersey, that person has to be an all-around person in order to get through all of that.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I do.
I mean, you're going to have people who are probably better at. I mean, basically, they're there to let you draft off of them for as much of the race as they can.
And I think what's interesting, too, is that the teams also specialize. Not every team is trying to win the yellow jersey. Some will focus on have a guy who's going just for the green jersey or just for the mountain stages. You can't have a team of 9 guys in support of every single goal in the race. So the teams will decide to focus on, all right, we've got a strong rider, we're going after the yellow jersey. Hey, we're just a sprint team, our guy can go wicked fast in the sprints. We'll focus on getting what's called a lead-out train, that training we talked about of right. aerodynamics going towards the finish line. And then, honestly, I don't think really anybody sets out to win the mountain jersey, the polka dot one, but it just tends to happen when you have a team with a lot of good climbers on it. And then often when their rider who's going for the yellow jersey crashes out, as in this year's race, so many of the top riders crashed out. I've never seen anything like it. So a lot of good climbers who would have been there to support their team leader just kind of go for it and try to get the polka dot.
Now, if you see somebody with that jersey on that leg of the race, is it just a prestige thing to let you know, like, oh, that's the boss kind of thing? Or is there some sort of scoring element to, if you can pass the person in this special jersey, then you get an extra point? Or like,
that's an interesting question. I'd never thought of that. No, there's not more points for beating the guy in the polka dot or the green jersey. So it's really just I won yesterday, flying my flag kind of thing.
Okay, it's just sort of like, yay, I get to wear a medal today, except that medal is made of spandex.
Pretty much, exactly. Yep.
It is weird that it's like, my dad was like, oh, I want to, the yellow jersey. And I'm like, it's kind of an ugly jersey.
It kind of is. But they also give them these amazing yellow lions, because the yellow jersey has always been sponsored by Credit Lyonnais,
yes.
which I'm not sure I said right, but it's
I think you
basically
did.
Lion Bank. so they give them this big stuffed lion. And when my wife and I went to watch the bike race, the Tour de France in 2002, we were hell-bent on getting one of those. We went in Paris, we went to several different branches, and we were going, where do they sell the stuffed lions? Where do they sell the stuffed lions? Because as Americans, we couldn't conceive of not being able to purchase a souvenir. And it turns out that they're actually prestigious, and like they only give them to the guys who win the yellow jersey every day, and they're these sort of rare collectible treasure things. And I was very crushed to not come home with my yellow stuffed
It's sort
lion.
of like somebody going to the Olympics and saying, where can I buy my medal?
Yeah, I suppose it was.
What was funny is in France they're a little bit different about souvenirs in general, because when I visited Paris one year when the Olympics were on, and the year the Olympics were on in France, and my brother's like, "Oh, can you get me an Olympic shirt?" And I'm like, "Sure, I'm sure they're everywhere." One place in all of Paris was selling anything that had to do with the Olympics. It's like the rest of the country is like, "Yeah, we're not paying any attention to that over there."
Mm-hmm. That was our experience too, just looking for a bike or for a T-shirt, like you said, for the bike race over there. There was a, you end up on the side of the road. You're honestly waiting for 4 to 6 hours for the bike race to come by, and so there's this train of cars that kind of, they're the sponsor vehicles, and you would expect to be able to. That there would be shacks everywhere with selling these, and just like you can get 15,000 plastic statues of liberty if you ever go to Battery Park in New York,
right?
Hell, you can get that anywhere in New York.
Or anywhere else in New York.
You could also get that in Las Vegas, and
But there is one truck, at least in 2002, that drove around behind the race and would sell one yellow T-shirt that said Tour de France on it, and that was it. It was the ugliest thing we ever saw. So we ended up being a little bit criminal, and they have these signs pointing the bike race. Down the road that they tack up, so if the riders are on their own, they know where to go. We pulled over and sliced one down and brought it home as our souvenir. So I think I'm past the statues of...
There's a statute of limitations. You're not going to get deported to France for stealing a sign.
Unless there was that one rider that couldn't find his way.
Yeah. Where am I? I have no idea. You mentioned that a lot of big riders have crashed out this year, and I wanted, and you did tease us with talking about,
crashes are insane.
Crashes. So, specifically, before you go into sort of like what it is about crashes, if you crash, are you automatically eliminated, or is it you're crashed out because you're injured that bad that you cannot continue?
Right. No, it's all if your body is so damaged that you can't go.
Okay.
Because if your bike is damaged and you're a big guy, somebody else is giving you their bike.
Somebody else is giving you their bike.
Yeah. Or the team car is right there, and
there's a car with techs in it and extra bikes and equipment. But I didn't know if it was like, oh, sorry, you fell over, you're not allowed to finish this leg, versus if you can get back on the bike, who cares if you're bleeding, as long as you can move, you can go.
Yeah, no, it's not like a video game where if you fall into the magical void, you're suddenly dead.
Right, that's kind of what I was thinking. Like, you are stranded in the Alps. Wait here.
Yep, exactly. But no, if you can get back up and get on your bike, even if your bike is sort of only half working, there's this whole caravan of doctors and mechanics where the riders kind of hold onto the side of a moving car and kind of continue down the road, and the doctor will clean out their wounds and bandage them up, and then the mechanic will lean out the window of a car going, 30 miles an hour, and like fix the guy's brakes or straighten out his handlebar or do all this other stuff.
Yeah,
so it's amazing.
Specialize. You think that pit crews are
well, yeah, this is a pit crew, except that if they were going around, there's no pit. It's just a crew. Now, is that legal? They're sticking their head out a window of a car going 30 miles an hour to do it. It's I mean, I'm a little bit more familiar with like I used to grow up. I watched Indy racing a lot, and so I'm familiar with flags and things like that. And you can pit at certain times. You're not allowed to pit at certain times. Is there? I assume there's a limitation on how long you can hold on to a car and still be valid with your time in the race.
Yeah, in fact, they disqualified somebody 2 days ago for staying behind a car because, I don't believe there's a set time for how long you can hold onto the car, but the judges are there and they're watching. They're in these red cars all around the race. And if it reaches a bullshit level, they'll call bullshit and either give you a 10 or 20 second penalty, or if it's really bad, they'll say, hey, you're done, go home.
Wow. But think about how, you think about, the time penalty. If it's a 10 or 20 second penalty, the fact that 10 or 20 seconds can really mean the difference between when you finish in this race, when you're talking about races that are so freaking long, that's a huge thing,
It definitely hurts when you get stuck with one of those. But it's the folks who crashed out this year ended up just being so hurt that they couldn't continue. But what's interesting is they weren't necessarily on the side of the road, going away in an ambulance, though that does certainly happen and did to one of the big riders this year. But sometimes it's that they get up. These guys have pain thresholds like you would not believe, being bike racers. So they get up and they get there and they get across the finish line, and then they go back to their hotel room and they start to let their shoulders down and relax a little bit. Everything swells up overnight. You guys have heard the phrase road rash. It scabs over, and all of a sudden the next morning they're just like, wow, I can barely move. I just can't do it anymore. So it's a lot more common that you see them go down, they get up, they finish, round of applause for being that much of an ubermensch to get across the finish line. But then very commonly you'll find out the next day that they can't come back after that.
Like the adrenaline is gone, and all that's left is the pain.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about these crashes, it's usually very rarely do you see an individual racer crash. It's usually a crash within the huge pack.
Exactly.
And
They're
you've got
brutal.
like all these people. So if one person goes down for any reason whatsoever, and these are, these bikes are built to be as aerodynamic as possible. So they are thin, and, these racers are huddled down, and, you try to get your body, and the helmets are specially designed. So everything is aerodynamically as possible. And then somebody just hits something wrong on the road. It could be, like a rock on the road, and they go down, and then they take everybody out with them.
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while you go to YouTube and you see clips of 20, 30 guys just plowing into each other because they're millimeters apart.
Yes.
They're moving at high velocity and they're inches apart from each other, or they're all stacked up in one of those lines that Paul's saying where everybody's drafting each other.
Exactly.
Because that's a strategy, but,
And you want to be as packed together as possible to make that aerodynamic. And
how do you sustain that one speed? Because, I have trouble. Okay, so I ride less than 2 miles a day on my bike as part of my daily commute, but I'm constantly, interacting with other vehicles and other riders, and occasionally I'll try to draft somebody just because it's, safest for us to ride in a straight line in San Francisco. But at the same time, I can't imagine how to keep pace. So when I see 6 guys in a chain, you guys have both ridden. How do you manage your speed when you're stacked up like that, which is the way you want to be, and not sort of suddenly go a little bit too slow so that the person behind you suddenly wipes out?
Like anything, it's a matter of practice. When I was racing in college, the team would have practices at least once a day, sometimes 2 times a day, and you're in a group of 20 or 30 guys, and for me, the older guys who'd been doing it longer just showed me what to do, and you kind of there's a way that you kind of rotate through in a kind of a rotating circle. And you just get used to it. You get used to kind of narrowing your focus and just going, all right, my hands are on my brakes. You keep literally an inch or 2 off the other guy's tires, and your mind develops the skill to just kind of process that. But it is iffy at first, and when you first do it, you're certainly not an inch or 2 away. When I did the AIDS ride a few years ago, I actually unnerved some of the other riders because I had a couple of stages where I was just dying and hanging on, and I would be hanging on the back of someone's wheel, and they would turn around and say, "Hey, you're too close," and I'd go, "Oh, sorry. I mean, I'm not actually trying to freak you out, but I do actually know how to do this."
Yeah, but I need you.
Yeah, but I would back off and I'm not going to. It's not a race; it's a ride, and I'm not going to upset somebody or anything like that. But it's just a matter of practice and learning. And you develop this kind of cone of focus where you're not really looking around. You're not paying attention to the other things that are going on. You're watching the tire in front of you and the guy in front of you, maintaining your gap. And then the person who's in front is always responsible for pointing out obstacles. So there's a lot of talking. You'll say things like, rider right or walker ahead, or you point down to point up to a pile of glass on the road so everybody knows to scoot over and not get flat tires. And, there's just a lot of kind of communication going on.
And they're all really skilled. So they're going to know, the difference with how fast you're going, you can see the speed that the person is pedaling and match that speed, because you can, match that, and that you're all in the same gear because you're all practiced together. I mean, the people that most of the time you're really around are the people that you've trained with. So you've developed that almost psychic link when you're just sort of moving together. But then also when you're in a larger pack. And I've done things where I've been like I did racing for a very, very, very brief, I think 1 year I raced. And it's when you've got a lot of people around you, there's an energy there, and you sort of feel it, and you can sort of all of a sudden know when somebody's starting to encroach on you, and knowing that you have to move to go with that, or you're going to crash. There's just a feeling, a sense that you get when you're doing it.
Mm-hmm. But that said, when the crashes do happen, you can't.
You do not know. Yeah, you do not know it's coming, and it's really horrible.
It's just you're lucky if you can have your reflexes, get your hands out in front of you before your face hits the pavement. I actually have a couple of different scars on my face from those sorts of crashes, and they're fast, they're brutal, and they're hard, and you just all of a sudden you're on the ground and going, oh, ow.
And if something happens to your front wheel, you can fly completely over the bike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went over my handlebars a few times. It's funny, my wife and I met in college, and our relationship began over me coming home from the rides each day going, hey, I hurt this, I fell off this way. And she was always kind of like, how did you damage yourself again?
So, I mean, I'm used to seeing cycling as this super high-tech sport. There's carbon fiber frames and all these other things, that people are doing, aerodynamic helmets, as Kat mentioned earlier. But when did the Tour de France start? I can't imagine that it has always been this technologically advanced. How far back does this go?
No, far from it on the technologically advanced part. It goes back well over 100 years. I believe the first race was in 1903. And it was much smaller. There weren't teams. The riders were riding for themselves. These guys were on these old bikes, I believe with wooden tires, sometimes rubber tires in the later years. I'm not sure about the wooden tires part.
God, wooden tires, that would be...
Yeah. I mean, you're feeling it then, right?
Yeah.
And they didn't have the whole suspension system, I'm assuming.
No, it was just a big, heavy steel frame. And they would have to carry everything with them. Their spare tires when they had tires, spare wheels. And the mountains they were going up, it was I believe it was controversial at first because they didn't think people could make it up these hills alive on a bike. These guys would go do it anyway. The roads at those times were dirt roads with lots of rocks. So their bike would just get beat to hell on the way up and down these mountains. And I remember hearing from one of the TV commentators the story of an older rider whose name I forget in that era, who his bike was so shot during the race he had to go into a local town, find a smithy to get his bike, metalwork done on his bike and put back together, all while the race is going on.
I just love that these towns still had smithies.
Yeah, exactly. Well, 1905 France probably did.
Yeah.
So it really has roots going way back, and it has changed dramatically and become this kind of worldwide phenomenon, up to the era of today where there's doping and all these other high-tech things. And there was even an accusation a couple years ago that one rider was going so fast that they accused him of having one of those electric motors inside his bike. There's electric bikes these days with motors built into the frame.
Yeah, in the hubs and stuff.
So they were X-raying riders' bikes after they got off the finish line for a couple years just because of that accusation. And they never caught anyone doing it. And I think it was just sort of childish bullshit because the rider who was accused of that, Fabian Cancellara, is that fast and has proved it repeatedly over the course of the years that he is just really quick on those situations. But
I'd like to briefly point out that the only times that the race has not been run since 1903 was during the two world wars.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Where France, there was a lot of biking in France, but it was not in a race.
But it was biking away from the Germans, not for
not for sport.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, you mentioned doping and you mentioned controversy and that's one of my intros. First of all, people only pay attention when things go wrong to a certain amount. But, Lance Armstrong is a household name and yet became even more of a household name for doping or accusations of doping. Like, can you sum up what the whole Lance Armstrong story is? When did he start riding and when did he become a dominant force and when, Americans started giving a hoot? But then, kind of what went wrong?
Yeah, so he started riding in the early 90s. He was a promising young rider through the mid-90s. And then he had a bout with testicular cancer and really was, near death for some time. Lost a lot of weight off of his frame as part of that. If you look at the pictures of him in the early 90s, he was just a beefier guy. So when he came back to bike racing, mass is not an advantage when you're going up a 10-mile high mountain. It's the riders who win the bike race are tiny little dudes. And so by being smaller, he had a much higher, power to weight ratio and was doing well. But he became, because of that bout with cancer and coming back to win the bike race, he became this really inspiring figure for a lot of people, particularly in the cancer community, and then just became this, worldwide and certainly nationwide phenomenon where everybody knew his name, and he was this great, inspiring story. A couple years, he ended up winning 7 Tours de France.
Good Lord.
Yeah. I mean, no one's ever done that. And
I think 5 is the next one down.
Miguel Indurain and I believe Bernardino both won 5 as well. But after a second or third win, there started being accusations of drug use. And I actually remember the year we went in 2002, we went to the Champs-Élysées, which is the street in Paris where the bike race always finishes. It's tradition. It'll never not happen. And I heard after the race was over, Lance came by and waved at all the American flags. And, because we had our flag out. Was just what she did at that time. And so we got some great pictures. And then this French dude standing behind me, basically, I speak very bad French, but enough to understand that he was basically accusing Lance of being a druggie at that time. And I kind of angrily turned him around and called him a sore loser. And it was just this sort of, fun, hey, you French asshole, quit being an asshole moment.
Yeah, that works. Always works well.
Yeah. So I thought it was an amazing day. It was really inspiring to watch him finish. And he always really vehemently denied the allegations of drug use. I mean, in a way that was so strong and so over the top that I was honestly convinced, I couldn't believe that you could be taking drugs and then say with such withering disdain that you never were doing it. And let's be honest here, Lance Armstrong, not a nice guy. He's not one of those guys who I look up to and go, wow, I wish I could leave my kids with him, so they could learn something from him. He's a dick. He's always been a dick.
It's like I considered him a dick when he, after he stayed with the wife that stayed with him during testicular cancer and, did that. Yep. And he's like, I'm going to leave you for
Sheryl Crow.
Sheryl Crow. And then when Sheryl Crow got cancer, he's like, I'm out of here.
I'm out of here.
Yeah. So let's be clear that his character is not, what
is not equal to his athleticism.
Yeah, not at all. But I still always, I've still always found him to be this amazing athlete. But, the doping agencies save all his samples. They've got his frozen blood and piss from, 10 years ago.
Oh, that's got to be a fun fridge.
Yeah.
Right, yep. And eventually technology caught up to the point where they could detect what he was doing at that time because the doping technology was just way better than the whatever the doping agencies who
Now, was it blood
stuff.
doping? Was it just keeping because I know that there was a thing where you took out your own blood and then put it back, and that superpowered you.
Yeah, they're allowed to do all kinds of things. Like bike riders sleep in low pressure tents in the room to simulate the effect of being at high altitude, which triggers your body's natural desire to create more red blood cells. But what the doping does, there's a combination of drugs and taking your blood out and concentrating it. It's all about getting more red blood cells in your blood. So it's artificially elevating the amount of red blood cells you have, which improves the amount of oxygen you carry. The more oxygen you have in your blood, the more wattage you put into your pedals.
Your muscles can do, yeah.
Exactly. So it was all about that. And, I've not followed it too closely, but it definitely involves taking out your blood, freezing it, and storing it, and then scientists evil scientists, I suppose, concentrate the red blood cells there for you. And then there's also a drug regimen you can take that does all that stuff. So he was doing some combination of those sorts of things, and all his team was doing it too. And that's where it comes down to for me is a lot of people have say, "Oh, fuck Lance Armstrong, he's so evil." And yes, he's really not a very nice guy at all. But I personally still really admire him for winning 7 Tours de France because I firmly believe it was a level playing field.
Yeah.
Everyone in that bike race was doping. He was the best. No one in that era was participating in that sport without taking those sorts of drugs and blood transfusions and that sort of thing. So in my mind, it was a level playing field, or at least a level enough playing field that stripping him of his titles is ridiculous. You would need to throw everybody or almost everybody
right.
on the bike
It's almost
race.
like
And maybe the guy who finished 170th would be the winner, but
Yeah.
It's not like they gave the title to the next person down in line. They just basically said there's no winner on these years.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of reasons to hate Lance Armstrong, and I can understand why anybody doesn't respect him. But he was a hero to me for a long time, and I'll always admire him for what he did in the bike race. But I do deeply wish he was just a nicer guy.
A nicer guy too.
But he's like I said, he's a dick. But he did some amazing things.
And then I want to talk about my hero.
Well, yeah, I was going to say
yes, my hero is Greg LeMond, who's now officially the only American to win the Tour de France.
Retroactively became the only legal American to.
Right.
And he actually has been. And I'm not going to say he didn't ever do the doping, but he's always been a real outspoken person against it.
Absolutely.
And like I said, he started out and he was a domestique for Bernardino's team, and he, I vaguely. Oh shit! I should have looked it up. Sorry. But he had won after he won his first Tour de France. He was in a hunting accident and was shot with pellets on hunting, and he had to sit out the next two tours. And when he decided to come back in '89, he's like, I just want to run the race. It's like, I don't think I'm going to win. I just want to finish. That's
Happy to be
all
here.
I'm looking for. Yeah, exactly. And he's a really he's like, where Armstrong may not be such a nice guy, he has always been like a really nice guy and a really sort of like homey guy. But he ended up winning the race. And then nobody expected it, and it was in the final stage that he won the race. And then he came back the next year and won it again. And he's like, "That's it."
That was one of the most amazing finishes of a Tour de France ever, too. I mean, he won, I believe, by 9 seconds in the final race, which was a time trial. Time trial means that no one is riding in a pack; everybody's out on the road by themselves, and they clock the times and add them up. He was actually behind at the start of that stage, and he won by a 9-second lead, devastating this French rider who had been winning the whole race. I can picture the guy's face. I'm blanking on his name.
Oh, I'll get it.
Yeah, but what's fascinating is part of why he won and was able to beat him was technology. He debuted in that race aerodynamic bars, which I don't know how much you guys are familiar with them, but picture normal handlebars and then picture an upside down U off the front of the handlebars, and you kind of lean over, tuck your elbows together, and stick your hands out and crouch down. And he rode them for the first time in that race, and there's a good chance, and this is pure supposition, that he actually was putting out less power than the French rider, but due to aerodynamics and technology, he was able to get a faster finish.
So if those are the guys that sort of built it then, who are the names that, if I want to fake my way at a cocktail party, who should I know now? Okay.
There's a great collection of characters this year, and as I mentioned earlier, a good half of them aren't in the bike race. There was the story I told of Chris Froome and Bradley Wiggins and the tensions in their team. Chris Froome easily should have won this year's bike race, but he just couldn't stay on his bike. My coach in college always had a funny saying that I loved, which was keep the rubber side down. And he just couldn't do that this year. Part of it was bike handling mishaps on his part. Part of it were people were running into him. It was a rainy first week of the tour this year, and rain and bikes, especially skinny road bikes, don't get along too well. But the other top names crashed out as well. Alberto Contador is a Spanish rider who's been a leader in the bike race for the past 4 or 5 years. He's been suspended a couple years for doping and is just now getting back into it. He actually finished a stage with what turned out to be a broken femur. So talk about Ubermensch points. He just had one of those go down really hard, hit the deck really forcefully. He got up, tried to keep going, just couldn't handle the pain level, which is saying something for a professional bike rider. And they took him off and gave him X-rays, and he had a crack. Not like a split in half bone, but a fractured bone. But I don't think I could even walk or move with an injury
let
like
alone
that.
Cycle 30 to 60 miles an hour.
And then my current favorite rider is Mark Cavendish. He's a sprinter, and I always like the sprinters because that's selfishly what I could do. And the poor guy had the worst bike race ever. The tour started in England this year. He's a British rider. Stage 1 was finishing in his hometown where his mom lives, and so there was all this drama and spectacle about can he win for his mom in his hometown. And he just got in this massive wreck at the finish line that was sadly his fault. He was not in a good position, and he leaned his head out and kind of shoved the rider over beside him out of his way, and they ended up both going down, and they were going probably 35 miles an hour, and he just was so screwed up he couldn't continue.
Oh.
So those is a sad story, but he even said it was my fault and apologized to the rider that he took down. But that's why I find the sprint finishes so interesting, is they're jostly and physical like that.
And I think what's funny is one of the big stories that came out of the Tour de France this year was the officials saying, "Hey, stop taking selfies. Stop leading into the road and taking a picture because these people cannot really, anticipate you leaning in as well as everything else that they're dealing with."
That's to the spectators, though, not the riders. The riders are not taking selfies on the bikes.
No. The riders were kind of actively swatting phones out of people's hands when they were taking selfies, and good for them for doing that. If you're going to endanger, a professional event like that, you need to get a smack, and your phone does too.
Yeah.
So, I think there was a lot of messaging about that, and it's a good thing. But it sort of left the stage open for like the second tier, or the bike race open for the second tier of riders this year. And the guy who ended up winning it, Vincenzo Nibali, probably would have been maybe on the podium in the top three, but I'm not sure he could have beaten Chris Froome and Andrew Talansky, who is the top American rider, who crashed out as well. So the other kind of prominent riders this year were Alejandro Valverde, a Spanish rider, and the top American who was able to finish the bike race by keeping the rubber side down. His name is TJ Van Garderen, and he did really well. He had a good, strong tour for a young rider, and is somebody I think who will be, bike racing. If you're in your 20 to 25, you're considered a young rider, and really they're more effective and successful in the 25 to 35 age range. He's just hitting that. He had a great ride this year, and I think he's going to be somebody to really watch in the Tours de France ahead.
I think that's great that it's not one of, like, usually with most sports when you hear somebody reaching 30, they're like, yeah, they're probably ready to be put out to field, and it's like, you're just getting into the good parts.
Now, one of my other favorite riders is Chris Horner. He's 42 this year, only 2 years younger than me, and he is just a machine in the mountains. He's doing all these crazy things, and he gets all these obnoxious questions from the media, like saying, "You're so old and you finished the race. How do you feel today?" And you can see him going, "Don't punch them in the face. Answer the question." So I have a lot of respect for, I know what the differences are. I can't do anything physically at 44 the way I could at 24. So that guy's out there at 42, having been a pro bike rider for 20 years and still is in the top, 10 to 20 riders in the bike race. That's an amazing.
That is amazing.
So if where can we find stuff if we're looking for information about the Tour de France or to watch things? Where should we go?
Mm-hmm. To watch the stages next year, it's only shown in the States on NBC Sports, which is one of the many flavors of NBC that's a cable channel. For us, it's channel 723, so it's one of those ones that'll be deeper back in your dial. They also, if you just don't get your TV from Comcast or similar, they have great web apps and phone apps where you can subscribe and just, you can get live coverage on your phone or whatever device you care about for a pretty nominal fee. I think it's $15 or $20 for the whole bike race. So just look for those sorts of apps on wherever you purchase your apps. In terms of websites, the Tour's own website is actually really good. It's latour.fr. And then probably the most prominent bike racing journalism website is velonews.com, and they're really strong and have a lot of great coverage too.
Oh, and I'm just going to throw this out there. And if you are a big Tour de France fan and you want to experience the Tour de France at home without actually, going to France, there is actually a bicycle, like a training bicycle that you can get that has little video screen on front and then programs of all of the stages.
Yep.
So you can compete in your own Tour de France. And my dad is a huge Tour de France fan. So yes, that is what he got for his birthday.
Oh, that's great. I've seen the ads for those. They look really cool. I believe they raise up and raise down too. So you get, you get the feeling of going up a hill and
so it's like a bike treadmill kind of thing?
Exactly.
It's like a trainer bike,
wow.
It's not like it's pretty intense.
It looks really fun.
It sounds really insane.
It is.
I just remembered what I should ask for Christmas.
Yeah. Well, Paul, would you like to, before you go, would you like to play a game with us?
I would love to.
You must choose.
Okay, so as you could tell, the game is called You Must Choose, and that is also the gameplay. The title is the gameplay. I'm going to give you two options, such as A or B, and whichever one your personal preference is, just as fast as you can say it, just tell me which one that is. So if it were like Pirates or Ninja, you would say...
Ninjas.
And as soon as you say Ninja, I'm going to give you another option, and Kat's going to be timing us, so 30 seconds is all we have to get through as many as possible.
All right.
But it's entirely just to see who you are, Paul Curthoys.
Oh, boy.
Kat, are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. Then, with this in mind, here we go. The timing will start as soon as I read the first one, and then she'll let us know when we're done.
Okay.
Transformers or Voltron?
Transformers.
Canada or Mexico?
Canada.
Batman or Superman?
Batman.
Tomato or tomato?
Oh, definitely tomato.
Greek or Roman?
Greek.
McDonald's or Burger King?
McDonald's.
White or wheat?
Wheat.
Ginger or Marianne?
Both.
R2-D2 or C-3PO?
R2-D2.
Mercedes or BMW?
Neither.
Brady Bunch or Partridge Family?
Brady Bunch.
Paper
Time.
Oh, you're cheating.
I was, yeah.
You're not
I can't
supposed,
help it
but
now.
you have one more to do.
What's that?
Dan or Cat?
Ooh, both?
No. The name of the game is You Must Choose. You must choose one.
Can I elect not to choose?
You cannot elect not to choose. You must choose one. If I'm going to let you slide on Ginger and Marianne being both,
So you should
then
have
you.
kept it.
Well, that was a good answer though.
It was funny. It was the right answer, actually. But yes, you must choose Dan or Cat.
I'm not sure I could do that. Then
Oh, I think you can. I think you have to. I got all the hard disk space in the world, man. This podcast could be 2 hours while we sit here and wait for you.
All right. Well, since I voted for Leah the first time, I guess I'll go with Kat this time.
Well, thanks for being on the show, Paul.
I don't know. It seemed like the only gentlemanly answer.
That's it's very nice of you. You're wrong, but it's very nice of you.
I wouldn't have been mad if you went with Dan because you and Dan have worked together.
Because we go back.
Right.
Although you and I have worked together too.
Yes, this is
Very
true.
much. Yes, indeed.
So thank you, because I mean, I know nothing about cycling, and everything Kat has ever told me, I've just filtered out through that husband-wife thing that happens.
Right.
But yeah, thanks for letting me know what the hell what was interesting about cycling. That was actually very interesting. I like that a lot.
Great. I'm glad to hear it. It's something I love, and I'm always happy to talk about it.
And maybe we'll have you back on later to talk about
I would love
other
to.
stuff.
That sounds fun.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
They really aren't.
Thanks very much, Mr. Knopf.
Incoming call from Control.
Oh, great, a new case. Put her through. Control, this is Chance Fortran, tech therapist. Yes, it's Chance Fortran, tech therapist. As the future's premier interstellar IT specialist, Chance travels the galaxy repairing the rifts between users and the technology on which they depend. Today, we find Chance checking in. So, what's on the docket, Control? A new case?
Not exactly, Chance. I got a call from upstairs. Command wants to see you.
Command? And did he say what it was about?
He didn't volunteer, and I don't question Command. He would like you to report in as soon as possible.
Report in? Like, in person?
That's what he said. I'd get here ASAP if I were you.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Control. Chance out. I wonder what Command wants.
Your odds of discovering his motives are exponentially higher if you attend the meeting.
Reconcile, do we have any paperwork or reports that we haven't filed yet?
I am unfamiliar with the use of the word we in this context.
Really? Fine. Reconcile, are you aware of any paperwork or reports that I have failed to file in a timely manner?
All paperwork has been submitted through the correct subsystems.
Okay, so that's not it. Maybe he wants to thank me for being such a great employee, right? That's possible.
The probability of...
You know, forget I asked. Just set course for Earth and the CTT. 12 parsecs later, at the Center for Technology Therapy.
Chance, it's nice to see you in person.
You look lovely as usual, Control.
Well, look me up when you get done with command. I'll buy you a drink.
Will do. I hate those things. They give me the willies.
Fortran, come in. Take a seat.
Thank you, sir.
It's been a while since we talked, hasn't it?
Yes. I mean, well, there was that time at the holiday party.
When you spilled your drink on my wife?
No. I think you must be... Well, yeah, okay. I forgot all about that. I think somebody else spiked the lunar punch, though, so...
Stop squirming, Fortran. That isn't why I asked you in.
Is it my caseload? Because I know I haven't been closing as many cases as Crash Blightmaker, but to be fair, he breaks most of that stuff in the first place.
Fortran, this isn't about your caseload. Or Crash, for that matter.
Okay, then. What is this about?
I'm having some trouble, and I know you're the only person who can put it right.
Well, I'm happy to help in any way that I can.
That's what I like to hear. You see, it's my haptic glove. It stopped working.
Oh, I thought this would be something... Never mind. Yeah, let me see it.
It was working fine, and then nothing. I'm no good with any of this techie mumbo-jumbo stuff.
Well, here's your problem. Looks like the battery's dead. Join us next time for another adventure with Chance Fortran, Tech Therapist. See, the green light means that it's on, and the red light means it needs charging.
I thought the red light meant everything was okay.
When has a red light meant anything good?
That is it.
This has been episode 9 of Dan and Cat Talk. If you'd like to contact us, we are at Dan and Cat Talk on Twitter, talk@danandcattalk.com, or you can leave a comment on our website. Chance Fortran is written and directed by Katrin Auch and produced by Dan Amrich. This has been a Play Record Pause production.